Hey, Canucks fans and hey, hockey fans. I am thrilled to continue my preview series of all four divisions in this, what's going to promise to be a very fun and crazy NHL season. I got my Canuck Clay Cup that my lovely wife Gail made for me. But most importantly, I'm really excited to be speaking with Nick of Twisted Wrister Hockey. Nick, welcome.
Thanks for having me on the show, Clay. It's awesome to connect with you on here, and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. And same to you. And I was doing a bit of research and I've watched some of your videos. We've chatted before. Tell me what's a guy doing in Idaho vlogging about the Sharks and the NHL in particular, in general, but the Sharks in particular?
Sure. So I grew up in Sharks territory, was going to games as early as 6 or 7 years old. And then just in October, I moved up here to North Idaho, so really close to Spokane. And some people would ask me, why did you choose Idaho? And I said, well, because I'm renting a 3-bedroom house for less than a studio in the Bay Area. So that's why I'm here. It's beautiful. There are some hockey fans. We've got the Spokane Chiefs about 30 minutes away from here. Yep. And I have seen a couple of people in Sharks gear, but even more significantly, I see some people from time to time wearing Kraken stuff. So I'm looking forward to maybe providing some coverage there as well. And of course, that rivalry that they should naturally have with your Canucks.
Yes. No, speaking of which, so Seattle, will they be geographically the closest team to you once they come in?
Yeah. So Seattle's about a 4.5-hour drive. And then, you can still get to Calgary and Vancouver within a day pretty comfortably. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know we made friends when our teams are battling in the Pacific Division, but for the 2021 season, there's no such thing. They are called the West. And we were joking around that it's going to get a little bit to get used to calling it the West Division.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm used to, the Ducks, the Kings, the Sharks, all kind of jockeying for position. That was more so in that decade, but now we have a bit of a change of guard. But before we even get a chance to see the Canucks and the Flames and the Oilers even mature and progress further, now we bring in 3 teams from the Central. I think things get a little bit more favorable for my team, but nonetheless, you've got some exciting teams to watch with Colorado and St. Louis, especially coming in.
Yeah, let's get into. You're right. You lose the 3 Canadian teams, but you bring in the 3 powerhouses from the usual Central. So let's talk about those teams right now. We'll go in alphabetical order. So you're gonna have to save yourself for the San Jose. But basically, for each team, Nick, just give me your overall general impressions, and you're welcome to talk about certain players, additions, subtractions, but just overall how you're feeling. And at the very end, before we go, we'll give our viewers a chance for each of us to rank maybe the 8 teams in a quick power ranking. Does that work for you?
Absolutely. Let's roll.
Awesome. So let's start with a team that finished 27th overall last year and did not qualify for the play-in, the Anaheim Ducks. Tell me about them.
Sure. So it was interesting. I was looking at their roster, and I had initially thought they would easily be the last place team in this division, but looking at things, it's not quite appearing that way so much. I don't think they actually still have some talent at forward. Defensively, I think that's where you see the names most with like Fowler and Manson, Lindholm, and now they brought in Shattenkirk. So I think they still have a pretty respectable defense. They can't rely on John Gibson to carry them the whole way, though. So I think that when you look at sort of their X factor, you're going to look at those young guys like Troy Terry, Sam Steele, and I think, what's his name, Max Jones for them as well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you have a second-year head coach with Dallas Eakins, too. So it might take a while for these guys to gel, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were competitive at least for a decent portion of the season.
Yeah, Gibson's always fascinating. And we were joking around before we press record that we were both at the San Jose All-Star festivities 2 years ago. And he got lit up, like it was an All-Star game. He got lit up a little bit, but I do know that even back then, he was a top 5 goalie, and maybe he can still keep that pedigree. Yeah, great point about the defenseman, about Shattenkirk. And, I think Adam Henrique was their leading scorer last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're correct there. I think what's interesting is that Raquel has really dropped off the last couple of years, and we had thought that he was kind of teetering on the edge of being a superstar about maybe 3 years ago. So I think if they can get him going as well, and then, you see a little bit of a step forward for those young guys I mentioned earlier, then this team starts to actually show some promise out there.
Awesome. And despite being a lifelong Sharks fan, thanks for actually taking the time and actually doing some research on the Ducks. Although on the hate meter for you, Nick, are the Ducks even up there as a San Jose fan?
That's a fantastic question. It's been a couple of years since I could say that. That was more the case when they had Corey Perry out there.
Yes.
If you want to talk about the most hated Shark, Corey Perry's at least in the top 3 there. But the hatred meter is definitely a lot more subdued these days. And same for the Kings for that matter. It's these guys right here.
Yes, and we're gonna get, unfortunately, alphabetically they go last, but we will save all our energy for them. Let's move on to Arizona. They finished 22nd overall by points percentage. They snuck into the play-ins. They beat Nashville in the qualifying round, but then they lost 4-1 to Colorado in the first round. What do you think of these hard to figure out Coyotes?
Sure. They're definitely enigmatic. I thought, the last couple of years that they would be taking a step forward, but I look at what happened in the offseason with the way that John Chaika left and with, they had like a draft pick controversy, and then you have Ekman Larson wanting a trade and that not going through. I think if they're not starting the season out smoothly, I think that things could kind of fall off the cliff for them a little bit. I know that they have stellar goaltending, but the thing is that you can't just rely on that every darn game. Eventually that you're going to get worn out from that or get exposed like they did against Colorado. And then I saw that, without, they could be potentially without Schmaltz and without Connor Garland, who's the only guy who can score 20 goals for them. Keller aside, it's been a couple of years, but
yeah,
if they don't start the season with them, I think things could be pretty rough for them. Nonetheless, again, whether it's Ronta or Kemper, you've got a shot every night, but you got to win those games 2-1.
Yeah, and I think you'd agree. Watching them for the past few years, they're not the most exciting team to watch live. And even their additions, Nick, no one of note. I see names like Johan Larsson, Tyler Pitlick, John Hayden, but those aren't real needle movers, if I may say.
Well, they picked up Derek Brassard. He had a pretty good season with the Islanders last year, but we don't know if he's going to necessarily get into like the top 6 with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. And speaking of that top 6, they've lost a few guys like Soderberg, Hall, and Grabner. So I think it's going to be a tough sledding for the Coyotes. I would agree with you on that. Let's go to Colorado. I don't know how high you're going to rank them, but spoiler alert, I have them pretty high in my power rankings. Finished 3rd overall, 2nd in the West, and they beat Arizona in the first round before losing to Dallas in a very tight 7-game series in the 2nd round. Tell me your thoughts on the Avalanche.
Well, first of all, we should hope that we get to see Landeskog and Rantanen healthy for the whole year. And if that's the case, and I haven't even made a video on my predictions for this yet, but I honestly think that Nathan MacKinnon, he should win the Hart Trophy in a runaway. He really should. He still was 2nd in Hart voting last season, putting the team on his back when those guys were out. They still have very good personnel overall. They got Brandon Saad, and then you look at their the potential on their blue line, of course, with the reigning Calder champion, Cale Makar, but also you got Girard back there. Byram, I don't know when he's going to come into the lineup. Not to mention Graves had a terrific season last year. I think he led the league in plus minus. And then in terms of net, I know that they had some injuries in the playoffs last year, but if they're healthy, Francouz, very nice season from him. And Grubauer, I think, is somewhat of an underrated goaltender, almost perennially at this point. So the makeup of this roster is fantastic. Nonetheless, I looked at an injury report, kind of like what I said earlier about the Coyotes. They could be missing some key personnel going into the season as well. So I do have my concerns there.
Yeah, but you're right. When they're healthy, how can you compete with that firepower when you have guys like Kadri as your secondary scorers? That's pretty good. Yeah. And that blue line. That's not even mentioned. The acquisition of Devin Taves. It's crazy. Yeah. It's You're watching the World Juniors and seeing what Bowen Byram's doing for Canada, and you're thinking, man, he's going to join a defense core with Makar and Girard on it already. It's almost unfair.
Yeah, pretty much so. I know that they're going to obviously have some cap challenges, not necessarily issues, but Sakic's been miraculous with that so far.
Yeah. Were you surprised that they lost to Dallas? And it wasn't easily. It went to 7 games. Were you surprised that they lost to Dallas, or seeing what Dallas did? Does it make sense to you now?
Oddly enough, I predicted Dallas in that series. I don't really know why. Maybe it was because they just turned the Calgary series on its side when it seemed like the Flames had that. Because there was that one crazy game where it was just like 9-6 or something like that. I can't quite remember. But then I said Dallas has something special going on right now, and that's kind of the nature of the beast with the playoffs.
Yeah, that's true. And by the way, you referenced that you still got to do your Hart Trophy predictions video. I've been for everyone out there watching, make sure you subscribe to Nick and Twisted Wrister. He's doing a wonderful series now on his predictions on major award winners. Just did Jack Adams. I love that you gave Travis Green from the Canucks some love, but we make sure you give Nick a sub that way. What's the next video you're doing for your award series?
Oh, well, it would be the Hart Trophy. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, you kind of gave us a bit of hint of who you think is going to win there. Okay, let's go to one of your state neighbors from a little while ago when you're still living there, the LA Kings, 28th overall, obviously did not qualify. And this is a team that had a lot of great prospects, but I'm not sure if they're there just yet. Tell me about them.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm looking at the roster, and it's interesting. It's kind of polarizing in a sense, because it's really hard to look at that roster and think that there's a playoff team there on the surface. But then the team, I think, won their last 6 games at the end of the regular season. And Todd McClellan, when you talk about, we'll talk about this later, but there are essentially 3 locks, I think, in this division to make the playoffs. That 4th seed is up for grabs between 5 teams. And when you look at coaching, the head coach, I think Todd McClellan has, he has the highest pedigree among those coaches for those remaining teams. So in other words, I myself am not sold on the Kings, but I wouldn't be surprised if they actually were able to compete for that spot as well. I like the addition of Anthony Ciu to the lineup. And I think that, Jonathan Quick will have extended rest going into this upcoming season. So things could be more stable in net than we would expect.
Yeah, they're an interesting team, Nick. You're right. They added Anthony Ciu and they lost to Foley Martinez during the season.
Yeah.
But they didn't really lose a lot over the offseason. And then they're just so old, right? Like with Kopitar and Doughty and Brown. And I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Can you really rely on Jeff Carter to be your clutch scorer still? I mean, it worked for them, several years ago, but I don't know if they have much beyond Kopitar, and Iafallo had a really good season playing with him last year too. So I want to definitely give some credit where it's due there. But beyond that, that's why I'm not really leaning toward them as a favorite to take that spot.
Right.
Fourth spot.
And I guess I should. Kopitar actually had a really good season. I'm not downplaying his efforts. And they have Byfield, they have Turcotte. I'm not sure how much they're going to do this year, but it's exciting at least for them to be thinking about those kind of things. I almost see them kind of where Vancouver was a couple of years ago, where the Sedins were on their way out, and others were on their way out, and they're just waiting for the Petterssons and the Hughes and the Bessers to make their stamp. But we'll see. And where are they on your hate meter? We got to talk about them because they're a California team as well. Where are they on your hate meter right now?
I miss our hate. I miss when the 2 teams would be battling either in the playoffs or in the regular season. That just isn't there, unfortunately, right now. And it's funny because I'll see some of the tweets back and forth, and I'm like, why do I strangely want you to be good right now? I honestly miss that, because the nastiness between San Jose and Vegas makes LA versus San Jose more just like a sibling rivalry, where it's you hate each other in the moment, but you actually still love each other anyway.
I'm just curious, the hate, I know we're gonna get to this, the hate between San Jose and Vegas. I presume that LA and San Jose and Anaheim and San Jose, did they ever have similar levels of hate in the past, or was that a new level? I
think Vegas and San Jose is a new level, though, with Vegas being more of an expansion team and not expected to be there. And I could talk about that for 30 minutes straight easily.
Okay, that'll be we'll do another collab there about that topic on its own. All right, let's go to a team I know a little bit from just playing against the Canucks in the playoffs or the play-in, and this is Minnesota. They finished 21st overall, 10th in the West, so they played the 7th seed, the Canucks, and they lost 3-1 to Vancouver in the qualifying round. So I saw a little bit about Minnesota. What are your thoughts on the Wild?
Minnesota is interesting. They responded really well late in the season when they brought in Evason for their coach. I think they had an 8-4 record there. But then with Bill Guerin, he makes some moves where I really kind of call them into question. Like when I look at the Donato trade, I like what the Sharks got, but I think that the Wild only got a 3rd or 4th round pick for that. I think that they could have been a little bit more aggressive in trying to get something more. And then they traded away Dubnyk, but they ate half of his salary there. But on the flip side, you look at, bringing in Nick Bonino. I think that that's good. I think that, naming Jared Spurgeon captain, I think that's very nice. I think Spurgeon's been probably, I know you can talk about Suter, but I think Spurgeon has been just perennially underrated and one of the better 2-way defensemen in the NHL there. So I like the makeup of this roster more than I thought so before we actually started talking here. The question for me is top line production. They brought in Marcus Johansson there, but they lose Eric Stahl. And then you also look at goaltending. Stalock, I don't know if he's going to be healthy to start the season. You have Talbot, who actually played pretty well in Calgary, but he's been hot and cold the last few years. And then you've got Kakkonen as well. I don't really know too much about him.
Yeah, you're right, Nick. They brought in a lot of guys. Butstad, I think, as well. So Butstad, Johansson, Bonino, Talbot. You're right. And then their rookie, I always butcher his name. Is it Kirill? Is it Kaprizov? Is that how you say it?
I think Kaprizov. Yeah.
Thank you. We got a white guy and an Asian guy trying to pronounce a Russian guy's name, but that's fine. So yeah, they're interesting. I actually had respect for them the way they played. Spurgeon, great point. I do like him. And Fiala, he's a gamer for sure. So yeah, I just learned a lot more about them when the Canucks played against them. But you're right. I think they're also not one of the elite three, so to speak. So they'll be battling. Okay, don't feel like you have to limit yourself to 2 or 3 minutes. Tell me about your Sharks. 29th overall, did not qualify. Is there hope for this team, Nick? Tell me all about them.
Sure. Last season it just went off the rails, honestly. DeBoer was fired. The team had a terrible first month. They had a scorching hot November and then tanked again in December. Just really an anomaly overall. They brought Bob Bugner in, and in addition to that, they brought Yevgeny Nabokov to come in as the goaltending coach. And that's going to be a bit of a factor coming into this year here because, believe it or not, the numbers for Martin Jones were less disastrous under Nabokov. And then as far as Devin Dubnyk goes, his season last year was atrocious. He didn't even play in the postseason. But I always point people to this number here. When you look at Dubnyk outside of this past season, look at the 4 seasons before that when he was, a starter in his prime, in his groove. He averaged out to a .918 save and a 2.41 goals against and a goals saved above average of over 10 each year if you average that out to 4 seasons. So there's no reason why this guy can't bounce back to something more respectable. So I don't think goaltending is as much the concern with the San Jose Sharks as people think. However, the big concern for them is if you look at this roster and compare that to the team that went to the conference finals in 2019, there are some big voids. Pavelski gone, obviously. Joe Thornton is now gone. And what really creates a void there is that the Sharks don't have a third line center. They don't. They had a chance to get Eric Howla, who signed for $1.75 million, and the Sharks had the cap available for that, and they didn't get it done. So I'm very much calling that into question along with the fourth line center. But having a third line center that you normally would have with a guy like Joe Thornton, that is an X factor for me. I still think the Sharks have enough firepower when you compare their potential point producers. You compare that to the other teams that could potentially reside anywhere from 4th to 8th in the division. I think the Sharks are by far and away the most firepower heavy team, but you also have to be healthy too. So we had some big injuries last season to Carlson, Hurdle, and Couture. And even though good teams find a way to overcome injuries like the Penguins, and the Sharks didn't, but I think that starting the season with all those components back into place will bode better for them. However, you also have to consider that they're not even playing in San Jose to start things out. They're playing in Arizona. So kind of a weird situation the Sharks find themselves in.
That's a great point. You look at the Sharks from yesteryear when you knew that they'd have to eventually replace Thornton and Pavelski and Marlowe. And you do have guys like Timo Meier and Couture and Hurdo and LeBlanc. Kevin LeBlanc, by the way, can you say a word about him? Because he signed that weird 1-year contract, right? Yeah. Show me one year, 1 million, and then he got a better one. How was his year last year? I'm only asking because he's in my fantasy pool. I'm trying to decide, it's a keeper. So I'm trying to figure out if I should keep him because we go 1 year back in salary. So this year I have him for $1 million, which is awesome.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Does plus minus get counted in games?
Just goals, assists. Yeah.
That's good. LeBlanc was a minus 33 last year. Yeah. So anyway, he ends up signing a contract for like $4.75 million for the next 4 years, something like that. I don't know how that gets done. And then you look at someone like Tyler Toffoli, who signs for like less than that, or maybe just a little bit more for a shorter term, who is a proven, I think he's scored 30 goals before. So, and not to mention the Sharks need somebody who shoots right-handed to score goals because LeBlanc he shouldn't be the best option for the Sharks as a righty. Anyway, gotcha. But someone's got confidence in him. And so we have to kind of just say, look, he's going to make some mistakes out there, but he also can be very electric at times. You look at that power play against the Golden Knights in 2019. LeBanc assisted on the first 3 goals and then scored the go-ahead goal himself.
I still watch that highlight pack, Nick, probably once every couple months. It was just nuts. It was crazy. Where were you watching that game?
I was there.
You were in the arena.
Yeah.
That must be nuts.
I tell people it is easily the best hockey moment I've ever seen live, but it's the second best sporting moment that I've seen live because I was in Minneapolis in 2018 for the Minneapolis Miracle for any football fans out there. So it was basically a walk-off touchdown to win the game.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Wow. Well, those are two really cool things. Yes. Your best moment hockey was that. Mine was also a game 7. It was Burrows slaying the dragon against the Chicago Blackhawks 10 years ago, though. I'm a little older than you. Okay. Very good. Thank you for that. So overall, we'll get to where you think the Sharks are going to finish up. We got 2 more teams. Let's talk about the St. Louis Blues, another team I know well because of the playoffs. 2nd overall in the regular season, 1st in the West. They lost to the Vancouver Canucks in the first round in 6 games. A lot of changes, a lot of big name changes here. Yeah. What do you think about St. Louis?
I think there's a chance that they do take a step back this upcoming season, and losing your captain and Pietrangelo, one of the best defensemen in the NHL, I think that's definitely going to be felt. Although, St. Louis is still very solid when you look at their defensive depth. So they bring in Torrey Krug to make things up when it comes to points. And you still have, of course, great talents up front like Ryan O'Reilly, Braden Shen, Tarasenko. I think he might miss some time to start the season. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
that sounds right. I think that's why they were able to do Mike Hoffman on a PTO. Yeah.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Now you add in Mike Hoffman. Yeah. I don't know how that's going to affect like their cap situation, but they still have some good weapons out there. You look at net though. Who's going to back up? I don't even know who's going to back up Jordan Binnington now that Jake Allen, who had a terrific season, is in Montreal. But overall, my sort of word on the Blues is that even if they do experience a drop-off, I still think that they solidify themselves in that top 3 for the division.
Yeah, and you can't. They're only 1.5 seasons removed from winning a Stanley Cup, and I watched them a lot. Obviously, Vancouver playing against them, and they have a really nice mix of experience, youth, toughness, speed, size, all those things. Although, David Perron really annoyed me. I guess you get annoyed by anyone over a long playoff series, but you're right. They still have a lot of power up front. Jaden Schwartz, Robert Thomas as well. So, but the Binnington question, I think you make a great point, Nick, is not just Vancouver, but I think he started to show a few cracks last season. He's still young. He's still so young. But yeah, we don't even know who's going to back him up. Who's going to replace Jake Allen? I don't even know, actually. It didn't come up in anything that I've researched. I don't know. So St. Louis, a good team. I agree, top 3, and we'll get to those final rankings. Let's talk about your favorite team now, the Vegas Golden Knights. Finished 8th overall, 3rd in the West. They beat Chicago 4-1 in the first round, beat the Canucks 4-3 in the second round, and then lost in 5 to Dallas in the conference final. And of course, the big addition would be Alex Pietrangelo. Let's talk about the Vegas Golden Knights.
Sure. So obviously bringing in one of the best defensemen in the NHL, that certainly solidifies them as a contender for the Stanley Cup. I think that when you look at their roster top to bottom, it is pretty much built to win. Now on the defensive side, I think Shea Theodore is going to make a lot of noise this year playing with Petro. So I made a video about my Norris predictions as well. And if you're a Knights fan, you might want to check it out. So we've got that in there. Of course, they lost Nate Schmidt, though. But overall, still a fairly solid blue line. Braden McNabb's still there. Derek Engelland retired, though. Yep. The third pairing needs some more experience before I can really have a word on them. And then when you look at their forward group, they have a terrific 1A, 1B sort of combo there. I think that a big success factor, though, if you talk about a deep run, is the development of Cody Glass, especially if he's going to center the second line now that Stastny is out. So that's a big factor. And my other big factor for them is, can they get some depth scoring from Alex Tuck? Will he be healthy for them? Because I saw what he did in his first year, and he looked like somebody who could easily play as a second line winger, on any other team for the most part. And just to sum things up, you also have Robin Lehner and Marc-Andre Fleury. I think that no matter who you put in there, you're going to have a chance to win pretty much every night. So I'm not as concerned about the goaltending situation. But yeah, this team looks pretty stacked top to bottom.
Yeah, that goaltending is a great point, Nick. And we talk about here in Vancouver a lot because of Markstrom leaving, but Holtby coming in to play with Demko. You're going to need not only 2, maybe even 3 goalies to go this year in a compressed schedule, playing all these 3 and 4 type things. It's going to be a yeah, all it takes, God forbid, is one injury, and you're looking at your third guy pretty quick. So I think Vegas is definitely deep there. Do you buy in any of these rumors about Pacioretty or Marchessault being shopped?
Maybe. I think about just the decisions the Knights have made in the front office when you think about, Kelly McCrimmon coming in as general manager. That wasn't something that was predictable, I don't think, just because of how the team drafted and was able to initiate some of those signings early on. And McCrimmon's doing a really good job. Kind of makes me think the cap is a myth, let me be honest. But that aside, then you look at the firing of Gallant. This is really interesting because people have been clamoring. It's like, how does Gallant not have a job? I don't know too much about Gallant outside of what happens on the ice. However, Gallant has never lasted more than he's never gone through his third season with a team.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I know that he had weaker personnel to work with in the past, but I think that's kind of odd. So I think almost anything goes for Vegas here. They could potentially shop one of those other players. I don't like the idea of them shopping Marchessault though, because frankly, it's fun to hate on him at times just because of what he says in media comments. But anyway, he's a really good player too. But I would think Pacioretty more so, but I don't know. I'm not fully sold that they're going to make that move to start the season out. But what do you think about that?
No, I agree with you. And I talked about this for another channel. If you think Marshall would be the more shoppable one, that he's younger, a little bit younger, but I think Vegas I think they'll realize they're going to need both of them if they want to. I love what you said about them needing to win now. And if you're trading one of those guys away, you're likely trading them for draft picks or futures. So I don't, I would agree with you that I'm not sure how high. That might be a lot of noise, whereas really I don't know how much truth there is. For you, scale 1 to 10, honestly, man, how much do you hate? Do you actually hate Vegas?
You mean, do I hate the city or do
Sorry, the hockey team? The hockey team.
Okay. Ryan Reeves, of course, I'm going to hate on him a little bit, but I think that he's entertaining. So if he were on my favorite team, I'd love him. I'd probably tag him in every tweet of mine. But it's nice to have a villain to really solidify that rivalry there. Of course, we got Peter DeBoer as the head coach over there. So I don't know. I'm more just waiting for the Peter DeBoer saga to kind of repeat the way it did in New Jersey and the way it did in San Jose. You know that Peter DeBoer never won a division title when he coached for a full season with a team.
So it's always when he comes in
they make he made the Stanley Cup Finals his first year in both New Jersey and San Jose. And so then it's kind of a slow burn after that. I don't expect that to be the case here with Vegas. They're going to compete for a cup. Yeah. But if things break down earlier than people expect, I'm going to be the first one to point the finger and have a chuckle.
And lastly, before I get to your predictions, I did want to ask you one other question about San Jose, because I'm so curious. Sure. The San Jose Sharks fan base, are they still fine, patient with the fact that they have Erik Karlsson making so much and Brent Burns making so much? Or are people kind of running out of patience, or are those guys almost untouchable, or is it kind of somewhere in the middle?
Interesting. Well, Burns he's going to be a fan favorite no matter what. Okay. I think it's the persona, it's the way that he plays, even the Burns he giveth and the Burns he taketh away. Okay. And he's just such a, he's a personality. I don't know if anybody here knows this, but he was just on the show Vikings. He was literally a character on the show. He wasn't just an extra. He had a couple of lines. And it was just the union of two of my favorite worlds together right there. So, Burnsy is untouchable in a sense. And not to mention, we're kind of waiting on after this season to see if we offer him up as bait for Seattle. So, that hasn't quite settled in just yet. And there are plenty of fans who are like, well, give Karlsson a chance. He's played here for 2 years. He's been hurt both of those times. Yeah. But I can already tell that it's rubbing some people the wrong way, considering that Joe Pavelski was kind of the cost of retaining EK65.
Well said. Well said. All right, Nick. So we've done a quick breakdown of all 8 teams, some of them playing in the same division with others for the first time in many years or maybe ever. So why don't you give us a quick 1 to 8 ranking? You're welcome to explain why or break them into tiers, but give you your 1 to 8. I'll give mine and we'll see if we have any consensus whatsoever.
Okay. Could I actually invert it to 8-1?
Perfect. Let's do it that
Okay.
way.
All right. So it's funny because I literally tried this 4 different times. So I had kind of like a first analysis. Then I did one in which I ranked a handful of those teams in terms of forwards, defense, goaltending, and coach to see if my rankings were different, and they were. And then I just went purely on instinct, and those rankings were different. And now I basically amalgamated and used everything together. So here's what I've got, actually.
All right.
I'm going to pull up my notes just so I'm reading the correct one. And yes, I am. So
all right.
At number 8, and I know some people have them as high as 5th or maybe even 4th, I have the Kings. I'm not convinced about their roster just yet. I know they have great prospects, but I don't see that progress, that next step being met necessarily. So I have them at number 8. At number 7, and I don't like putting both SoCal teams here because I can actually argue that the Ducks are going to be better than finishing 7th because I think that they have good defense. I think that they have, if they can get some development out of that, core of young guys like Terry and Steele and Jones, I think this team could potentially finish higher, but I have them in 7th for now. The Arizona Coyotes I have in 6th. I think they have the potential to be as high as 4th, but if you have guys like Schmaltz and Garland potentially being out for the start of the season, not to mention if the team doesn't start off well, I think this whole Ekman-Larson saga just gets even worse. And so I have them finishing 6th. Again, they could backstop their way into a playoff spot. Number 5, I've got the Wild because I think overall they're built pretty well. They don't have one sensational scorer at the top, not yet for this franchise. But I think that, the defensive core is pretty solid. They responded well to Dean Evison coming in last year. So I've got them in 5th. And I know it's a strong bias from my end, but I think the Sharks have the tools to finish 4th in the division as long as a couple of factors. If they can figure out somebody to fill in for the third line center, he doesn't have to be as good as Jumbo, but if they can be confident about who they fill into that spot, and as long as guys like Carlson, Hurdle, and Couture are relatively healthy through the course of the season, I think there's way too much firepower on the Sharks. And there's also Yevgeny Nabokov working with Martin Jones and continuing that success there. So that's why I've got San Jose in that last playoff spot there. 3rd place, I've got the St. Louis Blues. As I mentioned before, I could see them taking a bit of a step back. But again, as long as you've got guys like Ryan O'Reilly, Shen, Schwartz, Mike Hoffman, and you still have a very solid top 6 you have a solid top 6 and you have a solid 6 on the back end. I still think St. Louis is comfortably in a playoff spot there. And now the real juicy part here, who do we put at number 2 and who do we put at number 1? So at number 2, and I somewhat attribute this to what I saw in terms of injury reports, players potentially missing the start of the season. I've got Colorado finishing 2nd. Part of that also hinges on, they still have some fairly young defensemen. So they'll have, setbacks now and then. So I'm not expecting them to be perfect. I do expect, though, Nathan McKinnon to absolutely tear up this division. And then at number 1, I've got the Vegas Golden Knights because they're a team that's kind of built to win right now. And if you look at their division record in the Pacific, I know that that's not quite as relevant now, but they just eat up those California teams. So I expect that to continue, especially now that Petrangelo's on your blue line.
Wow, very good. So top to bottom, Nick, you got Vegas, Colorado, St. Louis, and San Jose as your 4 playoff team. You have Minnesota, Arizona, Anaheim, LA as your bottom 4. Is that correct?
Got it. Yeah.
Well, we were trending pretty close, actually. So I have Colorado, Vegas, St. Louis as my top 3 as well. And then I actually do have Minnesota as number 4. I did respect and I like what I saw out of them last season in the playing round. And actually, I'll do my qualification at the end. Then I do have Arizona, then San Jose, and then I have the same bottom 2, Anaheim, LA. So actually, when you're going backwards, I had the same 8 through 3 as you, except which is with San Jose 2 spots lower, but I had everyone in the same reverse order. But in hearing you speak, honestly, that makes sense. Everything you say about the Sharks, especially in finding their scoring and their better goaltending. So it's no surprise that we've been alluding to it all along, that we see this division. Both of us see it as in basically 2 tiers. There's the top 3 teams, and then there's the other 5 fighting for 4 through 8. So yeah, it could be any one of San Jose, Minnesota or Arizona.
Yeah, it's very different from the North Division, you know, in that you have 6 teams that can potentially win that division.
Yeah, and I was just preparing for my research for that one and the Ottawa one too. They're not there yet, but they basically turned over half their roster. It's going to be a fun time. You probably heard Travis Hamonic coming to the Canucks, so that might help a little bit.
My God, there is quite some. There is quite a lot of crossbreeding between them and the Flames these days.
Yes, I know. You've seen the jokes, I'm sure, about the Calgary Canucks, but we'll see. I like Mark Montana, but I'm happy they made their money. But I know that the Canucks simply weren't in a place to offer them what they got. So, but most importantly, Nick, this has been awesome. This has been a wonderful trip around the West Division, not the Pacific. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise, not just about the Sharks, the team you love and know, but all 8 teams. Where can people find you both on social and on YouTube?
Sure. So on YouTube, I'm Twisted Wrister Hockey. And on social, I'm most commonly on Twitter. And you can just search up Twisted Wrister Hockey. Or on Instagram, that's just Twisted Wrister Hockey, and you'll find me there.
Awesome. I will put all those links down below in the description. And Nick, let's do this again. Maybe sometime throughout the season, we can talk about do an anthology of San Jose versus Vegas, or just simply check in through the season and see how our respective teams are doing. But I really appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for sharing your love of hockey and your expertise with all people watching on my channel. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Clay. It's been great being on the show here with you, and I'll have to think of a way to get you onto my channel as well.
We'll make it work. Oh, by the way, and I must say too, thanks for doing that sweet mock-up CCC jersey for me too. I have it all over the house. I'm not sure my wife likes it, but I like it.
I had so much fun working on that. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks again. Yeah, no, please, no rush. Go for it.
I also have, and I haven't revealed this to the other channels I've created jerseys for yet. I think there were only like 6 so far, but I actually do have white versions as well for everybody. I'll just reveal those separately.
That's amazing. Yeah. Stretch that out, create some no, that's wonderful. No, you're very creative too. Obviously, not just speaking, but in graphics and video production, of course. So Nick, thanks again. Happy New Year and good luck to your Sharks.
Thanks, Clay. Good luck to the Canucks as well.
All right. Appreciate it. Take care.